Yo, what up? It's DOENUT, and you tuning in to all your Illuminati news. I'm here with David Whitehead. I got, oh my goodness, the most special guest ever, David. There's three people I look up to for research: Jordan Maxwell, the great Michael Tessarian, and yourself, David. I'm so honored to have you here. I feel like this is a dream come true for me.
Oh, well, Donut, thanks for having me on. That's you're too kind, but I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me, man.
Oh, absolutely. The story of my like recovery in my life and searching for the truth, exploring the truth, has been a wild adventure. And your Unslaved podcast, I got to see it from its conception. The first day it started, I signed up, and
Really?
it was 6 years ago. I was so broke. I was on food stamps, and I would cancel and sign up every month, and it was like $5 or something, and I would cancel and sign up because it was so important and it was so healing. The information that you were bringing, the truth and the topics and the suggested articles, movies, and whatnot. It's been a huge part of my spiritual life, learning life, and all that. So I'm just so grateful for your work. Thank you.
Oh man, that does my heart good to hear it. We've put a lot of work into Unslaved, Michael and I just love these subjects. I got into Michael's work probably back in 2007-ish was when I started to find his stuff. And then I found a lot of other researchers, went down and interviewed a lot of different authors and whatnot on my show, had my own podcast, Truth Warrior, going. It's still going. And then Michael wanted to do something where he could really just pare down and get all his research out. And so that's what Unslaved was. We built it in about 2016. So good to hear that it had a positive effect, and it's still going, still dropping lots of truth bombs over there. So yeah, I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely love all the work that you were doing with Unslaved, especially putting it out before the lockdowns. You two covered a topic called autophobia, which is the fear of being alone. And once I was reading about this, I noticed, like, even with myself, I wanted to be out. And then I went on this adventure of like, why am I scared to be alone? Autophobia. So when the lockdowns happened, everyone was, alcoholism was rising, addiction, people were being violent to their family members. Like, this was all on the rise. But I was very happy at that time because I was able to, because I was already practicing being alone and whatnot.
Yeah, that's good. And it's interesting you bring that up. I forgot about that we were covering that beforehand. And then, yeah, the lockdowns and the psychological toll that had on everybody, on the whole world, on children, like my own children. I watched, it's almost like stunted development in a way, when they had to see those playgrounds all taped off and they couldn't hang out with their friends and everybody was turning into paranoid schizophrenics and ratting on their neighbors. Like, what a horrible memory that all of us wish we could forget. But in a way, we can't forget because we can't let this happen again. And what we've been trying to do on Unslaved is really get into the psychological roots behind the rise of tyranny, or behind the rise of all this madness that everybody's talking about. Everybody's like, what's the source of it? Who's responsible for it? And while we definitely dig into many of the culprits that we can discuss at the highest levels that are probably behind a lot of these political things and a lot of this control structure that's being built, the one thing that's unique about Michael's work is he focuses on the relationship between the master and the slave, that dynamic, right? That if we study the history of cults, which is central to my work, we're getting into all that. We study the history of these totalitarians throughout the 20th century, for example, or the rise of tyranny today. You have to remember there is a relationship. It's not all just the big bad government or the Illuminati roundtable or whatever. That's always something going on. There's always people that are looking for power and looking for more control. But Michael's question was always, what is it that the slave is doing to enable the enslaver? And if we understand that stuff you're talking about, like autophobia and some of these other things, that's something that on an individual level you can deal with. Everybody can deal with their phobias and their inner struggles, but that is known by the social engineers. It's known by the people that are crafting propaganda, the people that are writing the Hollywood script and the media. They understand the psychological drives in people, and they know how to manipulate the worst parts of it, right? So that's what to me was empowering about the project of Unslaved, was not only are we learning the history of tyranny, the history of evil, how it all works, but we're learning that there's something we've done, sort of collectively to enable the system to come into place, which isn't about blaming anybody or invoking guilt, but it's just to say, hey, if we helped create it for them, we can uncreate it by empowering ourselves. And so that's sort of the main message of the Unslaved project.
Oh yeah, wow, well said. I mean, you're such a gem, David. It's so wonderful the way that you can explain stuff. And I always try to tell my audience by being, from what I've learned from your podcast, Unslaved, and is that the individuals out there, no, I wouldn't say the individuals, but the collective, they're the Illuminati. They're the ones who are ushering in the beast system in a sense. It's not the elites, it's the people that are the pushing it, enforcing it. So like everyone's pointing at the tippity top, but it's the neighbor next door snitching on the neighbors during the lockdowns, and they're the Illuminati, Right. So I always say that, and it always does go back to ourselves. And something that I like that you always talk about too is, look, I'm here to give the information. I'm not here crusading, telling people to wake up. I used to when I first learned about these topics and movies like Endgame and whatnot. I freaked out, and I would just, don't drink the water, mom and dad, but then I'm being a tyrant. I'm being tyrannical. So now I just go back to me and the individual and what can I change? And that's not easy to do, changing ourselves.
It's not. And you got enough of a handful just dealing with that. And so do I, and everybody out there. And I was in the same boat, man. Like the minute I started realizing a lot of this stuff was going on behind the scenes, and how, if I guess we all think that, and it's an accurate thought, is to think that, well, if more people knew about this, we could put an end to it, right? But when you find out that people don't want to know, that if you had, I love those memes where you're like in a mall or something and there's two kiosks, and one kiosk is like uncomfortable lies, or sorry, comfortable lies, and the other one is uncomfortable truths. And obviously everybody lines up around the block for the uncomfortable, or for the comfortable lies. That's just a great description of it. And it shows that in so many instances, people could throw off the tyrants, no problem. Like think of all the people that went to Jim Jones' Jonestown and ended up like giving poison to their kids and like committing mass suicide together.
I shouldn't be laughing. I'm not laughing. I was laughing, but I'm not laughing at that tragic event that went
right down. No, I know. I think I know what you mean. You get the irony of the situation in a way, which is that we do have a lot more power on the board than we think. And while I am very positive about the overall process of, humanity waking up to a certain degree, at least, never to the full thing, but to a certain degree, we're starting to really get a crash. It's getting very easy to see through the veil. Let's just put it like that, the veil of lies. But at the same time, you can disempower yourself by putting all your energy out there, trying to shake people awake. It's almost futile. You do more harm than good. You can't force people to see what you see. So what I tried to do now is I'm in the zone of I'm going to create the best content I can, do the best research I can, make it as good quality as possible. And those who were interested in it, that are ready to hear it and ready to explore different ideas, then they're going to show up, and that's it. We can't become what we hate trying to end the tyranny that we see. You know what I mean?
What's your thoughts on all these new type of truthers that are pushed in the mainstream, like Russell Brands and stuff like that? It seems like there's this huge push of people that are being labeled conspiracy theorists that are all very top level mainstream pundits, and you've been looking at this for so long. What are your feelings of all this happening right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. Without getting into the detail on every single person, but I know exactly the types of people you're talking about. We could be seeing two phenomena happening. One could be that there's sort of a COINTELPRO, there's some money going around, and they're trying to co-opt the organic alternative research movement, right? I definitely see signs of that happening, whether it's just these people involved in it or not. I'll let everybody decide. So one part of me is always very suspicious when you have, people like Russell Brand who pretty much just jump on every bandwagon that shows up, whatever the popular trends are, they're on that, right? Like if it was the new age vibe a couple of years ago, he was into that. If it's everybody's going back to the Christian church thing, then he's into that. And then, so that could be a personality thing. That could just be him. And that's just what he is he's doing this he's just going along with the trend, or he's doing this for attention, or these guys could actually be paid to do what they're doing to, give the media more cannonballs to launch in the direction of the genuine people trying to put the truth out. So it could be that, I always have that on mind. The other thing could be that we're just witnessing a change in the overall zeitgeist, and some of these people are just trying to appeal to the growing popular movements. And maybe they even believe maybe Russell Brand is genuine and he's trying to look for the best approach possible. And you can give him the benefit of the doubt and just go, yeah, you're definitely way off on a lot of things, but I see you trying, and that's always a positive thing. So I don't want to come to a conclusion. I don't know these people personally. Right. But I have studied the history of how like COINTELPRO works, how propaganda works. I can use my imagination to a degree to think about what it must be like to be in the media or the government or sitting at some of these round tables at the WEF or wherever it's happening, that they would be panicking knowing that average people like you and me that are just sitting in our basement podcasting are getting more views than the mainstream media, and so they need to erect people's champions to put out in front to kind of distract from anybody getting to the real hardcore facts that are being delivered by literally citizen journalists or journalists who've left the mainstream and are trying to do their own independent journalism now. So it's a mixed bag. And I don't like to conclude on it because I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I also know too much about how the system works to be naive enough to say that it's 100%. He's just going along with the trends. You never know. There could be a lot of that kind of stuff going on.
And I find it interesting that when he chooses religion, he was peeling rose petals. And from your research of the cult of the medics going into the Knights Templars and Tessarian's research with the War of the Roses and the Tudor Rose and the bloodlines and the Algo lines, which are the blood going over like the Da Vinci Code with the blood into the sink with the right. Bloodlines. I see the symbolism all over the place, and everything leads back to a lot of different cults that are ancient, Sabel, Mithra cults, and the rose is like a huge symbol. What's your thoughts on that? Because I know you've gone deep with the Templars, because that's what I'm very fascinated in. That's probably my biggest fascination right now is that. The Priory of Sion and all that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. We've done just so people know, we've done at least a dozen shows or more on the Templars and the symbolism and these Masonic, the history of Masonry. We just did a series called Princes of Light, and it really dives into the history of Masonry. We've looked at this from so many angles, and Michael Tessarian would be, in my opinion, the world's foremost expert on these organizations and societies. And what I've picked up is just the idea of following the symbolism. And that's where you can start, because it really never leads you wrong. Because there's this interesting dynamic where these orders, while they might be considered secret societies, they do have the symbolic language that they like to put out there. And you see it in the film, you see it in the logos, you see it all over the place. And speaking about the rose, this is a symbol that is very linked to Christianity, a lot of those religions, but it's also very big in Masonry, and it has a lot to do with orders like the Rosicrucians, etc. And you got to remember, these orders aren't just black and white either, right? There was factions within factions behind the scenes. And what I think happened was you had the original canon of this ancient archive of symbolism and ancient knowledge and whatnot. These libraries of Alexandria, what we call the mystery traditions. And when you had these orders like the Templars going into Jerusalem, into the Middle East, and not a lot of people don't know that, first of all, they were the first international bankers of the world. They were setting up, like, they worked in tandem with, at a time they did anyways, with the Knights of Hospitallers. There was a rivalry afterwards, but before that, they were working on behalf of the Vatican and the Roman Empire, essentially trying to reestablish it in Jerusalem. And they formed liaisons with these like Frankist groups and these Eastern mystical groups when they were there. And I think what they did was take pieces of that lost archive I was talking about from what those Eastern groups knew, and started to bring it into the West, into Freemasonry, into Templarism. And that's why you see so much Eastern symbolism in Christianity and in Judaism and in the Templar and the Masonic institutions. So the history of symbolism is really important when you're trying to understand this. And while people could say, well, symbolism is subjective. I look at a rose and I see something beautiful from nature, and now you're trying to say it's evil and it's a symbol. It's like, yeah, a symbolism one-to-one is subjective. But what do the people that utilize these symbols mean when they use those particular symbols? They're religious symbols. That all symbolism is really born from nature, if you think about it, right? It's just humans observing nature and then filtering what they see in nature through the lens of the creativity of the human mind. And what comes out the other end is this archive of symbolism and art and all the great artists, right? But when you're talking about elite societies, especially religious or cults like societies, they ascribe a divinity to it. They ascribe something different to it. And what I think they noticed, the powerful elites over the years, is they started to realize that the symbols were powerful when it comes to the public mind. When it comes to what the symbol does and evokes in us, that's where they saw the power. So that's why with all this symbols of halos and light and the sun and crosses and roses and swans and eagles and double-headed eagles, like, there's a reason these Black nobility families and these aristocratic dynasties and secret societies use those symbols. And it's because those symbols are powerful in the human mind. And so you can't say the symbol's evil. I'm not saying roses are evil or even upside down pyramids are evil. It's just that it's the way it's filtered through our minds. And then you got to think about, what does it mean to the people employing the symbols? Like, I do a lot of this. I don't know if you know about my documentary series, Cult of the Medics. Yes. I've been working on that for many years now. And I get into all this, the Templars, the Hospitallers, the secret societies, the pharma, Rockefellers, the whole thing. And when you look at medical symbolism, the story is told. Because when you think about doctors and the health system, 95% of the world had no questions to ask of the pharmaceutical world or the medical world. They were just like, yep, this is the best medical system in the world. There's nothing to see here. Everything's on the up and up. And then after now everybody's questioning everything they think they know because of what happened. And what I was trying to do was say, well, what if we understand that the symbols used in modern medicine aren't modern, and they actually go back to literally ancient cults coming out of Greece, Rome, Egypt, etc. And so what I did was track it. And you can get into the orders like the cult of Asclepius in Greece. You can get into some of these other things where there's like a religion, a cult that's built into a medical coterie of orders, right? And so there's literally a cult of medics, like, that's always been around. Now, the next argument will be, well, they must have just always been working in the best interest of humanity and trying to heal the sick and take care of the needy. And of course, that's what you see with the modern Knights Templars and the modern Knights of Malta and the Red Cross and the Salvation Army. It's all looking like we're just here to help the starving kids in Africa and make sure everybody gets bills delivered door to door and just help to heal the world from all the sickness and disease. But when you get behind it and you see the funding and you see the track record and you look at the names of the people that have joined those Templar and hospital orders, going into the Nazis and the Mussolinis of the world, and it's incredible. So what all I did and what we've done on Unslaved is say, hey, we're not saying everybody's evil and everything's evil. We're not going to like that black pilled level at all. We're just saying corruption does tend to grow no matter where the light is shining, right? Like you have to always remember that maybe in the original, it was all done for positive, benevolent purposes, but over time, power can corrupt. And that's what we tried to track, because the proof's in the pudding, man. Look where we are. That's all I have to say is, if it was all positive, it was all on the up and up, and these symbols mean nothing, and these orders have no power, and there's no influence happening behind the scenes of government, then why is the world in the situation that it is? And why do we keep finding the same institutions, the same groups behind it all? So that's kind of where I started on my track. And I owe a lot of debt of gratitude to people like Michael and Jordan and these people you've mentioned for putting me onto it. And I'm only grateful that I've been able to research what I have.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for what you put together with Unslaved, Tessarian, Jordan, Maxwell, all the great researchers. And I remember there was a podcast where you guys were going over it. And it's been very helpful for me to connect the dots with the red shield of the medic symbol, the Templar type cross. And I believe it was Tessarian. I'd never like to quote him because he's just so smart. I don't want to misquote. But I remember him saying something about it's connected to Adonis. And then I just went down this whole thing of Adonis, and I'm at the point where I think that the Twin Peaks, like the show, or the Aleister Crowley, the AA, the Twin Peaks, is for Venus and Adonis. I don't know, though. I'm just looking. But yeah, it is incredible. And the cults are interesting. I got to speak with Charles Moskowitz, who I asked to come on because of your show, because I'm Jewish. And I was like, man, Tessarian, David, breaking down the camouflage. I got to bring this guy on. So thank you for introducing me to him. And the another guy I really enjoy, I don't know if you know him, he's a Canadian as well, Matt Eric, Canadian Patriot. He goes over some Templar stuff. I think that all y'all getting together would be like the dopest podcast. His wife is great. And he sent me an email today going over the Vesica Pisces, because I was talking about that from Jordan's research, where he's all like, the White House, it's a phallic in a Vesica Pisces, the sex symbols of sex symbols in the stars. And he sent me something today showing me the Jack the Ripper killings were created in like a Vesica Pisces. And I thought that was wild. And it just made me think of all the stuff I learned from you and Tessarian, how these were ritualistic slayings. And it was around the time the newspapers were out. So it's like the whole fear stuff as well. But yeah, health is important to you. You run your own dojo and been into martial arts for a long time. I need to get healthy, obviously. But I am very. Have you seen the movie Ghost Dog?
I have. Oh, it's with Forrest Whitaker, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a classic, man. The Way of the Samurai. He's going through the Hakaguri, the Book of the Samurai. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Oh, you got it?
You know about it. Okay.
Good for you.
Hakaguri. Okay, so
that's a classic.
Classic. I always bring it up. And this is like the movie inspired me to get this Hagakure. And I don't have martial arts experience. I've taken some Krav Maga or whatever, but I'm not, I don't know anything. But this book was so fun to read, bringing the spiritual elements of like the samurai, the way that they kind of lived. And I was like implementing it in my life. So there was this one thing that I took away from it, that never walked the same path. So, and it's sort of a military thing where like, if you walk this way, then walk back home, you can get like assassinated or something, but it's also like a flow. So I started doing this in my life, like whenever that movie, this was a long 2006 or something. But yeah, that's cool that you know the Hagakure. You of course you know the Hagakure. Why wouldn't you?
Well, I'm glad you do. And that's great. And I always tell people, like, even if you're not interested in training the physical arts, I started learning martial arts by reading it. I studied more of the philosophy of it, got into reading like Jigoro Kano's notes. Like he was the guy that founded judo. You know, Gichin Funakashi, of course, founded Shotokan karate. Mora Hayashiba with Aikido. And then you got to get into the classics like Miyamoto Musashi, and then Hakaguri and the Book of Five Rings. And these are like pinnacle books in my life because I started with them pretty young and I have them in my collection. And what I was always blown away by was just the incredible depth and wisdom that was totally unique in the warrior traditions, right? So that's a huge part of what I like to do. And that's why I called my show Truth Warrior, was because I wanted to talk about like relevant things and the philosophical idea of seeking the truth and all that. But I wanted to lay it on the foundation of warriorship. Like, what does it mean to be a warrior? There's the physical component. There's like the modern day physical Navy SEAL warriors or whatever. But then there's the archetypes, right? Like if you think like Carl Jung and his archetypes, that we all have these different archetypes embedded in our psyche. And warrior is one of them. It's that part of you that will stand up and face challenge and face adversity and maybe think more strategically and get that more 50,000 foot view on things. And it gives you that backbone in life, right? That kind of stuff always appealed to me. And even though while you're reading the Hakaguri and some of these books, you're going to read a lot of like horrific stuff too. Like it's quite a mixed bag. There's just a unique, there's a unique wisdom to that tradition that you're not going to find in the religious world. You're not going to find from the theologians or the rabbis, because these guys weren't the ones on the front line for the most part, right? You go and read the works of, like I started looking side by side at the culture of the Spartans, the samurais, and, you know, some of the native tribes and their warrior ethos, right? And when you put it all together, you can find a lot of commonalities because these were the guys facing almost certain death on a daily basis, right? So I feel like today, when you see modern men, especially, just being these like wilted, no spine, not fighting back, not having a voice, you know, sitting back and being very timid, right? These betas kind of culture, that they're missing the ingredients that were given to the previous cultures, which were raised with these warrior tenets. And so what I'm trying to do is resurrect that. And that's why my wife and I reopened our dojo, and it's a huge part of my life now. We're doing it full time and I'm absolutely loving it. It's keeping me in shape, you know, it's good. But at the same time, it's also keeping me in that headspace of getting back into these classics again. And I think this is the mental side of things that people need today to get through the fog of war that we're in. We are at war right now. It's a war of our minds, a war for our freedom. There's a spiritual war going on, if you want to use those terms. And so what better aid to call for than to go to these ancient warrior traditions and try to find their wisdom and get their ideas on the board as we navigate what's coming. So it's a huge part of what I do. I'm so glad you brought it up.
And this war goes into demoralization. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How it's connected to, like, somebody in the KGB was talking about the destroying of America with demoralization?
Oh man, you're so onto it. I'm thoroughly loving this. Yeah. So I recently did a breakdown. So I'm now on Substack. I'm producing all of my work on Substack personally. The Unslaved project is separate. It's on unslaved.com. It's a custom site. But on Substack, I've been personally just covering this and revisiting it. His name is Yuri Bezmenov, and he was a former KGB defector that was brought over by G. Edward Griffin and interviewed. Anybody doesn't know G. Edward Griffin, please go look him up and read all of his books. He's phenomenal. I've had the honor of interviewing a few times. But anyways, he in like I don't know if it was the 80s or 90s, he brought Yuri over to America and interviewed him. And what Yuri did was break down the playbook, which at that time was, you know, there was a lot of the tension between Russia and the United States. I guess it's still there. But he was breaking down what the objective of these communists were at the top. And he said there's actually a playbook of how they infiltrate non-communist societies and free nations and how they take them over from within, because that's their modus operandi. And he broke down the 4 stages of what he called ideological subversion. So the first stage is demoralization. So you go into a nation that doesn't have your ideals and you want to take it over from within, Trojan horse style, right? You have to demoralize the public mind. And you demoralize it by, you know, look what they're doing. America's evil. Everything in the West is evil. You know, they're demoralizing in the school system, in the media, in the advertising, etc. Demoralizing the culture. So then the people of the culture don't really feel energetic and motivated enough to fight back against the incoming propaganda. Then you have destabilization, which is done through, it's a bit more direct. Usually this has to do with the economy, just putting lots of heavy burdens on the economy so the prices go up and you destabilize the nation. And there's many ways they can do it, right? And then you introduce a series of crises. And either the crises are naturally occurring that you just take advantage of and you weaponize, or you create the crisis, right? And then from those first three stages, you end up with the goal, which is normalization. That's the final step. And once you achieve normalization, what's happened is you've normalized the doctrine that you were trying to inject in the enemy nation to take it over from within. You're trying to normalize that. And when he said that, and I started re-looking at that during the pandemic and the lockdowns, my mind was blown, because I'm like, they're literally using the Yuri Bezmenov playbook right now, because look at what do they do? Demoralization, destabilization. That was like, the Bush era, Obama era. All of a sudden, here we are. And then crisis after crisis. Now we got the lockdown. Then it's the climate crisis. Then it's the wars. Then it's all these things. And the crisis causes a reaction from the public. And the public goes, save us from the crisis. And the government goes, sure. And then what they do is they normalize the actual agenda that isn't in the best interest of the people. So it's a huge part of it. And I think that this goes well before the KGB or the communist experiment in Russia. This is an ideology that I was trying to show people the occult roots of communism, fascism, and these types of things. They didn't just get born in the public sphere. They first were cooked up behind the lodge doors in a lot of these secret societies. And I did a show called what I call it, the Occult Conspiracy. And then another one I did called The Occult Roots of Communism, and break all that down in there. And I think that's what they're doing. I think they're literally following that exact playbook.
And this playbook, you were breaking down how they've tested it out. They've done test runs already with the National Socialists and stuff like that. And they just figure out which is the best playbook, and they're just using that today. We kind of can see how it's like a connection of all of them happening now it feels like it's a worldwide thing now, a global takeover rather than just America only. It seems like it's with the lockdowns, the entire world agreed, every government agreed and was like, yes, let's do this. The crown symbolism there. So there's ways to fight back. You're talking about the archetypes, and I did enjoy your show with Jesse Howe as well. I got to go on there, and I saw that show. That was incredible. But the archetypes that you were bringing up, how they don't give us the hero anymore, and this goes into the changing images of man. Probably there's that famous report that they understand like the symbols of the mind and how powerful they are.
Yeah.
But you brought up on the Unslaved podcast this fabulous film that I watched called The Fountainhead, right? Where you got Rourke character who's sort of like a Trump character, but this is way before Trump. This is like this character who's just this strong man who's like, I don't care what you say, I'm an individual, I'm gonna do what I do, kind of. He does this fantastic speech in it. Is that one of the solutions, is to be introduced to heroes like that? Because we got all these superheroes, but like they could be super sus. I don't know. What's your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you brought it up. You definitely watched a lot of the show, and it's the idea of the hero archetype is a major thing that's missing, especially when it comes to what we're introducing to children, right? Look at the heroes they're worshiping today. You got what? Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, like all these celebrities that are just puppets they're circus animals today. You don't really see many organic, real hero celebrity types anymore. They're all just sort of robot copies of each other. So that's not really giving any incentive to call on the inner hero archetype within the minds of these kids or in the minds of the public. And then what they're doing is they're messing with the archetypes. They're flipping all the archetypes and reordering them. And this is, I think, part of very much a black magic type ritual, if you want to use those words, to describe what's going on, because this is part of this ideological subversion process, I believe. And so, because what is the hero archetype all about? It's about taking personal responsibility, seeing your potential down the road if you apply the old school ethics of hard work, apply yourself, believe in yourself, surround yourself with other people that are also of that mindset, that have that heroic, positive view of the world. And that's how we're going to achieve success. This was the old traditional values that are now looked at as, oh, that's for the old fogies. That's all. They're calling it Nazism now. It's ridiculous, right? So it's like, no, the heroic archetypes are age old. This is what the myths and legends were all about. This is what's in the scriptures and in the Torahs and in all over the world, the Bhagavad Gitas. What are they but Hollywood productions of ancient stories of heroic characters doing heroic things? And now the heroes are all super overblown, unrealistic. They're always in space. They're all somewhere else. There's not like the grounded heroes of the day, like you're talking about in The Fountainhead with Howard Rourke. And of course, that was written by Ayn Rand, who has turned out to be quite a prophet, hasn't she? Where she's basically predicted exactly what's going on right now in America, especially. And then as to your point about this being a worldwide situation, you couldn't be more spot on. I think when we think back to the past of how we saw tyranny rise up or totalitarianism rise up, we saw it mostly happening in one nation here and one nation there. And then we saw the gang warfare of the 20th century, where they're trying to suss it all out. And I think what these guys at the top did was just sit back and take notes and then go, well, this is going to be the way we apply this to set up the world empire that we want. It's always been the goal. We want a world empire, one ring to rule them all. And if you want one ring to rule them all, you can't have societies and civilizations like here in the West that are teaching their children hard work ethic, private property rights, free speech, heroic archetypes, warrior archetype. You can't deal with a population like that. You can't subvert a population like that. But you can subvert a dumbed down, highly, constantly sick, mentally ill population that doesn't believe in itself anymore. You can definitely submit a demoralized population. And I think that that's why what you brought up is so crucial. Bringing back and resurrecting the hero archetype again, and bringing that heroic part of yourself out during these times of distress that we're in is the solution. It's at least the starting place. And it's what birthed the best parts of Western civilization, or any positive trait in any of the civilizations in the world, were those heroic individuals. It was never masses of crowds of people that caused great change in history, is it? It wasn't masses of crowds of people that made all the inventions and changed our lives for the better and brought our thinking forward. It was always these heroic individuals that were running uphill with, flaming arrows flying at them, so to speak, from all directions, who were being persecuted by their governments or by the church or by the people around them, who were calling for their imprisonment because they were thinking outside the box, So we need more of that. We need that to be resurrected again, is people who are fearless in the face of all this propaganda and all this collectivism that's trying to drag down the genius individual heroes out there that are trying to bring solutions. We need more of that, not less. And so that's why what we've been trying to encourage on Unslaved is to introduce children to good, positive hero archetypes, and showing them about, here's Bruce Lee, here's Miyamoto Musashi, here's, there's so many heroes we could show them and say, these are the examples to follow. Don't be just obsessed with these TikTok celebrities. That's just such low grade. It's not even worth your time. So yeah, we got to bring back the hero. That's for sure.
And the movie that y'all recommended, Circle of Iron, I think it used to be called The Magic Flute, Bruce Lee's last film that he wrote before he died. That was a great story of the hero and the individual. I don't remember it too much, but I remember it had a huge effect on me. So like the movie list that y'all recommend, I got all of David's links down below. Everybody make sure to go subscribe to the Substack, subscribe to Unslaved. It's absolutely a game changer for your life to break free in so many different ways. And one thing that I get from your podcast is that I walk away from them not feeling crazy. I walk away from them like, oh, wow, I feel good. It's a good feeling that I have when I walk away. And that's probably why I continue on this journey. But being introduced into the arts and the heroes and all that is amazing. Do you remember you bringing up the Circle of Iron film at all?
Oh yeah, Michael and I have talked about it a bunch. It's a gem. I'm a fan of all Bruce Lee's movies. I love his writings. Some of the more, there was a couple years back, we got a release of some more of his little writings that he would do in some of these latest books, and just phenomenal. Guy was ahead of his time, and there's been many like that. And so what we do is basically collect these types of thinkers that you call them mavericks, right? These are people that were highly esteemed in their field and then became controversial because they sort of went on their own path. And you think about it in science, you know, you got these people like Walter Russell, or in philosophy, people like Alfred North Whitehead, or some of these guys who were originally part of the official stuff, you know, officialdom, and then they broke away and started thinking for themselves. You know, how dare they? And then they get persecuted. But they are the mavericks, they are the heroes. And it's that old thing. If you haven't been pissing anybody off, you haven't been doing the right kind of work, because, you know, the truth tends to do that. And also remember, there's that crab in the bucket phenomena that happens when there's heroic types around, where people that feel small around these types of giants, they try to bring them down just because of that, not because of anything else. And so that's what the hero also has to contend with, is he's getting shot from all sides. You know, the powers that be are trying to take them down, and the people behind them that should be supporting them are trying to take them down. But that's just what makes them more special. So yeah, Bruce Lee, I love that finger pointing to the moon stuff, and just the way he would talk about it. And he was also unique because he came from China, from more of the Eastern philosophies, right? And then came to the West. And not only did he study the Western martial arts like boxing and wrestling, I would consider him one of the first MMA guys, you know? He came from those original Kung Fu traditional schools, and they hated him for it in China. Not the people, but the top level guys there were mad because they're, oh, he's selling our secrets to the West, and he's bastardizing them and changing it, and, you know, breaking from the tradition. So he was like the most anti-cult kind of guy. And I just love those types that are trying to find the free flow expression and truly be real artists and mavericks. So Bruce Lee was definitely, he's been a huge influence on me. And there's just so many names to mention, and that's why we collect them. And there's probably a lot of people who go to Unslaved. I'm sure you've experienced it. I've even experienced it being there with Michael. I just do the interviewing and I do all the camera stuff and the back end. And my mind is blown every single week when we record. There's always something new that the man brings, or new names I'd never even heard of. And then when I go look them up, you know, people like Viktor Frankl or Jim Mars or some of these other people, Godfrey Higgins or whatever, I didn't even know who these people are. I read their work and my mind is just blown. So it's just what it is it's an archive of the stuff you never got told. And when you hear it like that, and then you go look into the sources, that's why I think you're having that positive vibe. And I'm happy to hear that that's the effect it had on you, man.
Oh, absolutely. And like, I go grab the books that y'all recommend. Like, I got the whole Alexander Lowen collection. I haven't read all of them. Yeah, but I got them because I know I will read them eventually. I read the narcissism one, the joy to life, and it's so important, the internal world as well as the external, like going back to the self. And yeah, so I go watch the movies. I even got a Nathaniel Brandon book autographed. It was like $5 because these are these gems that the collective doesn't see. And speaking of the collective with fighting and whatnot, I want your take. I know it's rigged and it's fake or whatever, but let's say it's not rigged and fake and it's real. Mike Tyson or Jake Paul?
Well, I, like many, I respect Jake Paul for what he's done. Okay. The guy knows what he's doing. Let's just put it like that. And he's making lots of money being the bad guy. All right. But as a fight fan, as someone that grew up with the nostalgia of Mike Tyson, everybody wants to see Mike Tyson land just one of those hooks across the chin just to silence the whole thing. So let's just say first of all, let's just see if this fight even happens. Okay. Second, we don't know if there's truly the rule set in place where they're trying to knock each other out. I feel like that would be a big mistake for them to do. If anything, they should be trying to just make it like more of an exhibition, glorified sparring match. Because that would, you know, nobody wants to see Mike Tyson go in there and just get KO'd, right? So, you know, here's hoping if it was to happen in an idealistic world where it wasn't rigged, that, hopefully Mike Tyson can land that cannonball. But we'll see. He's 58 by the time he fights. He's got an ulcer. I mean, Jake's picking on an older Mike Tyson who's going to be like a shadow of his former self. I would have loved to see if we had time machines. That'd be sick. If they release some kind of classified in tech and we could take him back to Mike Tyson's prime, that would be a totally different fight. Let's put it like that.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Mike Tyson's tattoos are interesting. I don't know if you ever looked at them, but there's a lot of communist tattoos. And
Yep.
Jake Paul's tattoos, a lot of Illuminati type tattoos, the all-seeing eye and whatnot. And something that I thought you articulated very well, and I'm so grateful for it, because being a conspiracy theorist since however long it was, however long it's been, I guess the movie Zeitgeist came out, and I think that's what kind of changed the reality between millennials and baby boomers, because millennials, we were introduced to this at a younger age, which made us question stuff like that. So I think that plays a huge role. And I think that their second film was like very communist, social. I don't know much about it. It was so long ago, but the communist stuff and also being Jewish, I look into all the conspiracy theories, and it's always pointing at that I'm the bad guy, and I'm like, oh my gosh, right? And then I hear more to the story. There's more that's being left out, and it goes into these ancient cults, the camouflage, the skin suits and whatnot. And that was mind-blowing information for me. And it's something I've been just going down the rabbit hole on. And I thought that you explained it very well. I tried to explain it the best I can to my audience, but the way you vocalize how there's all these different sects that are the esoteric, not the exoteric, controlling stuff is interesting. What's your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. This has been something that's been really big in the conspiracy movement, let's just say, for a long time. And Michael and I have been doing a lot of research on this together. He and I were both talking about this years ago because we kept getting emails from everybody talking about this whole Jewish conspiracy thing. And of course, there's only like 5 authors that you can find as the original source for those types of things. And then you got your protocols and all that kind of stuff. But when you really pull back the layers of that research, you start to realize that, like, when we say the word Jewish or Christian or Islamic or whatever, or even Masonic, most people have a sort of general idea of what they think those things are, but they don't realize that all of those names I've just mentioned, all of those different sects are part of ancient cults that have been competing with each other for thousands of years. And there's many differences between them all. So you can't pin down one group and say this one group is responsible for all the tyranny and evil we see in the world. That's just such an amateur take on it. When I say people talk about Jewish conspiracies, I'm always, okay, which sect of Jews are we talking about here? Because there's many sects. They're all just like in Christianity. There's many competing sects fighting over what they think the final truth is or what the right translations are. And one thing that we found as the line of it, because they'll bring up the Bolshevik Revolution, or they'll bring up some of these periods of history. So, I just see Jewish names everywhere. And you say, well, you really got to get into the history of this and understand, because we also have Jewish names of people that were friends to the West and helped build the principles of freedom and contributed greatly. So you can't just say it's all one way. And I think that this is part of the propaganda machine. I think the issue is the poison pill is this radical revolutionary politics ideology that, if you read a book by James Billington, it's called Fire in the Minds of Men. He was formerly a congressional librarian, and he wrote this book about the history of the revolutionary flame and what that entails and how it's hit. It's definitely affected Jewish people, but it's also affected Italians and Catholics and Protestants and every denomination. It's affected atheists. It's affected, like, you keep going through it and you realize, well, you got to get to the ideology that's really connecting these negative forces. And it's not one religion or one race of people. it comes from all of its pieces of all of it. So the way I break it down is that if you want to talk about what we call the high table, the criminal high table that's really trying to push this globalism and the human depop and all that kind of stuff, they have members from every denomination of humanity. They have people from, you know, all the different factions, because they have to represent everybody, right? Look at the UN for just as like a political example. So, and there's many other things we can get into. And we've done, I think we've done 6 or 7 detailed shows on this on Unslaved. We even got into the whole Khazarian thing, because this is what other people bring up, the Khazarian conspiracy. And while there's definitely true pieces to it, so much is left out, so much is hyper generalized, that you're not getting into the academic level of facts at all when you're dealing with these average people. So this is why you got to pare it down. You got to really do your digging and stop firing arrows at just general groups of people that maybe you don't like for other reasons. Like, let's be honest, the people saying it's a Jewish conspiracy typically come from either the Islamic or the Christian background, right? And then the people saying it's just purely, it's only the Jesuits and it's all a Catholic conspiracy, they come from competing factions. So I'm always aware of this, and I know that there's evil on all sides, okay? Nobody gets out of history unscathed here. And I want to know if maybe at the top of all of this, we're not even dealing with a human agency at the end of the day, or at least we're dealing with something that feels like it isn't part of the human family and is operating in that capacity. So I look at it more like, I see, I'm also not a collectivist, so I don't collectively judge people. I judge individuals based on their actions and their responsibility for any crimes they've committed. Whereas these types of people, they like to paint a general brush and just throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I just think it's not accurate. And you might want to check your premise and realize there might be other motivations behind why people fall into that. And we need to combat that in this community, because it should be about the truth. And it should be about finding out why all these religions even exist as competing factions on this question of truth and reality. And maybe all of them have an original source. This is what I've been doing lately, is going, okay, what is Judaism? What is Christianity? What is all these religions, right? Where do they all come from? I'll give you a quick breakdown. They are interpreting the mystery. All religions and all cults are just simply different cults of interpretation. They're interpreting what we call the mystery. What is the mystery? It's the confrontation of humanity with nature and the forces of nature that they couldn't understand. We couldn't understand what plugs nature in and turns it on. What makes the sun go up and come down, and the moon and the stars and all the seasons and the wind, and what's the purpose of life? What happens when we die? These are aspects of what we call the mystery. And so religions are just pieces of different ideas that are trying to explain the mystery. And they all go back to 4 central cults in the ancient world. The biggest one of them being the stellar cult, the cult that looked at the stars, and it was the whole astrotheology thing. And they were trying to explain the mystery through what they saw up in the heavens, which was something they couldn't explain. And then it all came from there. And then there was history, and then corrupted priesthoods grew up around it and bastardized it and changed it and created competing factions, because that's just what we do. And so when we see the competition and the factionalization going on in politics, make no mistake about it, the religious world suffered the same fate. And so that's why it's a lot more nuanced than just saying, oh, it's the Jews, it's the Christians, it's the Muslims, it's these guys over here, it's the, whatever. It's not even all of that. It's a part of us in the human mind that is sort of working against itself, and it has many expressions. And you really got to get into the origin of where all this stuff come from to even get close to analyzing who's sitting at that high table and what their true agenda is. And that's what we've been trying to do on Unslaved since we started.
And with the whole generalizing thing, didn't you bring up how generalizing was also used by like the KGB or someone, right? Maybe not. What was that about? I think you said something about generalizing people to make them fight each other or something. Do you remember?
That's it. That's again from Yuri Bezmenov. I was watching, you can actually see some of his lectures on YouTube if you go look it up. They're a few hours long, and he gets into the specifics about how this is done. And you got to remember too that all of these people are also a part of this enslavement program that everybody likes to point fingers at, right? At the end of the day. And so, yeah, generalizations. Look what they're doing with the way propaganda is going on the media. Look at how they dealt with the thing, big, wide generalizations. Like everybody that's questioning this brand new experimental product that we're going to is a conspiracy theorist, is a this, is a that. And they start generalizing people together so that people that don't spend time actually looking into this stuff can just go, yeah, that guy that's denying Greta Thunberg's climate change thing, he must be an evil Nazi or whatever. So it's just like this false equivalency that happens in the mind. And so generalization it's a logical fallacy when it comes to philosophical thought, first of all. And second of all, it's actually a tool used in propaganda to put out wide generalizations against a target enemy that you want everybody to look at so that they don't look at to see who the real enemy is sneaking through the back door. And that's that camouflage aspect that you were talking about that is just so effective. And we got to wake up to it to really get down to who's really doing this and why they're doing it.
Especially with the memes and the memetic magic, which you can read about. Like it's old, going back to, I guess you could, when I'm reading the memetic magic books that were written in the 90s before memes, Timothy Leary talked about, not Timothy Leary, the other guy, the other social engineer, talked about memes, Terrence McKenna, and the Spangler, I don't know if it's Spangler, Richard Spangler, I don't know if that's his name, but he goes into NLP and whatnot. They were talking about memes. We got memes now, and a meme is just this one, it's not even an idea. It's just a generalization, and you don't have to think. You don't have to do anything. You just look at it, say, that's the meme, we're good. Like, and I believe this idiocracy that we live in, all the memes are used to push us in direction. Cryptocurrency, it wasn't that popular until Dogecoin, which is a meme coin, got pushed. And there's some very interesting symbols connecting to Doge, in my opinion, like the Doge of Venice, and just there's a lot of symbolism in all that. But the whole bias stuff as well goes into our nervous system. So we're born with this imprinted religion or culture that you can't get out of. Like it's different than brainwashing. Brainwashing, we can snap out of that. But imprinting, like that give me the child at 7, I'll show you the man. That's the imprinting that doesn't leave the autonomic nervous system. So I believe everybody is just being used as a tool through their culture, their religion, or whatever by this master chess player at the end of it. It's very interesting, and I keep on researching and looking into it. And you brought up Viktor Frankl. That's going to be my next deep dive because I need to get some positivity in my.
Be the man.
Yeah. Well, what's up with Viktor Frankl? You got anything that you learned from his book, the Meaning book, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's endless what I've gotten from him and getting into his stuff. And just really quick on the meme thing. Yes. I'm personally of two minds of it. I love that you brought up the warning side of it, because there's definitely that. Like the propaganda warfare is very sophisticated right now, and the social media landscape is the battlefield. So you're going to see both sides of it there. But there are also some really good memes. There are also some good memes that can maybe just it just kind of, it's like comedy. It just encapsulates the truth so beautifully and so simply, and it can lead to logical conclusions and get people to go look into it more. So it can be a double-edged sword, and people need to use their own discernment when they're out there, for sure. But when it comes to Viktor Frankl, it's interesting how he wrote his book about man's search for meaning. Essentially, he was a survivor of concentration camps and just saw the worst of humanity, and somehow came out and wrote just this amazing, positive book. It reminds me of someone like Solzhenitsyn, who suffered in the gulags in Russia and then comes out to write just an inspiring work like you can't believe. And to me, that's the true heroic principle at work. And for Viktor Frankl, you know, if you've heard of Nietzsche's will to power, if you get into philosophy, and we've been talking about this a lot on the recent shows and showing the pros and cons of all these thinkers. He had this idea of will to power, that it's like man is bestial in origin, and we have this will to power, and that's what the whole game is out, is we're always seeking power and dominance and everything else. And whereas Frankl came in and said, that's only one part of the story. there's also man's will to meaning. Meaning, this is all gets into that idea of studying the mystery as well, by the way, where it's like, okay, if I'm looking outside right now and I'm seeing these trees in my garden and everything going on, I can look at it as I want to dominate that and control it, right? That's that will to power. Or I can bring in the other part of myself, which is to find meaning in the beauty, or even in the chaos of nature, or even just in the challenges of life. So when he was talking about meaning and just the way he writes, the quotes that I've put up a few times here and there, they're just so profound about how to actually find meaning and generate it from within and apply it outwards to the world, rather than seeking meaning in the external world. Everybody else outside of you and everything outside of you is where the meaning is. That's where most of thinking goes. Whereas he was trying to orientate you back to the self and say, no, kingdom of heaven is within. The meaning is generated from the inside out. And you can generate meaning even in the darkest storms. And here's from a man who survived a brutal, brutal time of history. And so I recommend everybody get Man's Search for Meaning. Read it. There's even some interviews with Frankl you can get here and there, but just another brilliant guy that is trying to orientate humanity back to the thinking of, I'm not just here to eat, sleep, shit, and die, and there's no point to life. And it's not just this will to power. It's not just evil in the world. It's not just dark. We shouldn't be black-pilled. We should recognize that and point at it and go, yeah, let's study that. But recognize that most of that evil is born from minds that never discovered meaning, right? So the solution is what someone like Frankl and many others like him would espouse. You brought up Nathaniel Branden, another great mind on this kind of stuff, about having a positive view of the self, of humanity, of nature, right? And trying to bring that meaning from the inside. And so, yeah, can't recommend his work enough.
Oh, well, thank you for breaking that down. So what's on your agenda? We got some things going on tomorrow. We got the Olympics, which is going to be weird, going into that whole predictive programming from 2012, which astrologically was a dragon year, and we're in a dragon year now. If you look at the Economist magazine, this year it's got Trump on it as the moon, like the eclipse in a sense. And the 2012 one, it was the world in hell. And I mean, the predictive programming of the Middle East conflict is right on there. The two paragliders, it's absolutely nuts.
Wow,
And that's a Red Shield magazine. It's a Rothschild magazine. And the Olympics, and also the whole Trump assassination attempt is interesting. All the different stuff going on. What's your thoughts on what's going on right now, and what can we look out for? What are you looking into right now, and whatnot?
Yeah, lots there. There's probably a podcast on every one of those points. I would just say, I think a lot of things are starting to really unravel for certain factions of this war. I think we're going to start to see a lot more chaos. Like I was saying this earlier, like 6 months ago, I'm like, we're heading towards an election year. No matter what you think about any of that or all the players involved, this is going to heat up, and we're going to see more chaos than you can imagine as these sides are fighting it out, right? So we're definitely going to see some very interesting things unfolding. Oh man, the assassination attempt, the media, the whole thing, it's so much to get into, but I'm going to keep covering it the best I can. I've actually been trying to focus my work on some of the more meta themes right now, just because it's so hard to follow all the latest trend. Like, it's like so much stuff is happening. I wake up every day. Like right now in Canada, I woke up this morning to find out that Jasper National Park and the little town I live there is like gone. It's just gone. Wildfires.
Are you close by there?
I'm on the island in British Columbia. So no, we do have a fire that's raging on the island, which is pretty weird because they usually don't last too long here because just of where we're situated. But there's definitely wildfires going on. And it was just sad for me to hear that. And then, the day before, all the stuff, what's going on in America, what's going on in the UK, what's going on in France. Like, it's just endless. So I feel like, we're living in the chaotic times. And so I'm trying to bring my work back to, let's go back to thinking about the bigger themes here. Like I've been doing a lot on comparative religion and mythology. I've been doing a lot when it comes to the more conspiratorial stuff, just on understanding that blueprint that Yuri Bezmenov was breaking down. I'm doing a show coming up real soon on my Substack talking about the psychology of totalism, which is really doing a comparative analysis of how China, the Chinese government, has been able to get just absolute total domination over the public mind there in a way that's never been achieved, and how that system is currently being applied in the West and how we can identify it. And I'm comparing my notes on that with all the research I did on studying various cult doctrines and seeing some of the comparative stuff there. So I'm trying to just give people like the bigger themes to watch out for so that they can see through any of the propaganda or the bullshit that's definitely going to be coming their way from all sides, and trying to bring people back to nature, to groundedness, to family, and to personal solutions. Because it can be really deflating. I'm sure you feel it. I feel it. Constantly looking at all these big situations going on, having no control over any of it, having no knowledge of what's going to happen next. We literally live in the craziest movie ever right now. And so people can get really defeated, and that could be demoralizing for them. So I'm trying to bring them back to, well, let's go with what you do have control over. You have control over what kind of food you're putting in your body, what kind of information you're putting in your head, how you're interacting with your kids and raising your kids, how you are with your family, what's your state of mind, what's your state of well-being, and where's your knowledge at? Is your knowledge only about all the dark stuff, or have you also learned about the good stuff too that we have to learn about, right? And so trying to balance out the mind to battle the propaganda and give personal solutions, it just seems like that's where I need to focus my energy. This is why I reopened my dojo as well, because I get to be hands-on with people, teaching kids, teaching families how to be strong, resilient, and healthy. And that has been therapeutic for me, just to see those positive results. So that's where I'm going in the recent coming up. And then I guarantee there's going to be some more major events taking place. So I'll be definitely covering those as they unfold.
Yeah, one of the last episodes on Unslaved, and everybody click the links down below. Go to David's Substack, join his Substack, join Unslaved. Got all those links down below. Click the button, and you did this episode on the crowd, the mind, right? We got the mind that lives in the head, but then I think that I'm different because I'm isolated. I'm not going to go with the crowd, but the crowd still lives in my head if I go on Twitter, right? And everybody's opinions. So I'm in that same spot where I'm like, yo, I got to step back. I'm going to cover the Olympics and whatever else, but like I got to step back and look into the Viktor Frankls and whatnot, because it's still that mass psychosis of the crowd going on these social media. I can feel it.
And it's from all sides, isn't it? Like it's no longer just one distinct lines. It's just this. I don't know if people survived psychologically the last 3 or 4 years. A lot of people that I know, I don't think they quite came through it. And so I'm like, okay, if we keep banging people over the head with all this negative stuff, people are going insane, and they're just going down way too many rabbit holes and freaking out. And so I realized right away, I've got to orientate my work to raise the standard of it and try to find ways to show people the truth. Like I'm not going to shy away from covering some of the dark stuff people need to know about, but it's just for the purpose of understanding how we got here so that we can get to solutions. If you make your message always about not just presenting information and then just dropping the mic and leaving the room, but trying to go, here's why I'm showing you this. It's like how I would show my children, talking about when I was telling them about why everybody's wearing masks and going insane, and why the playgrounds are taped off and all this. You have to give them a positive ending to the story. You have to give them some hope and inspire that hero in them. So that's what I'm trying to do with my work, is go, hey, it's not all bad. There's definitely a lot of bad going on, but we can take our power back. If we gave our power over to these oligarchs to rule our lives for us and tax us to death and tell us how to live, we can take it back. But it's not going to happen as a we, actually. It's not going to happen as like this mass sudden movement where everybody just wakes up and it's over. It's going to be individuals like you and me right now, and anybody listening to this, taking back their own mind and realizing that freedom and meaning and truth and all of these principles that we love, they come from the inside out. And when you put that armor on, man, you're not going to get hit with all the slings and arrows that everybody's getting hit with. And it doesn't mean you're turning off a blind eye either and just being ignorant to what's going on. It just means you're balancing out your mind. And I think that's really key, because when you're not in balance, if you're too pie in the sky thinking there's nothing wrong, you're over the deep end. If you're thinking everything's evil and wrong, you're over the deep end. Find that still small center, that balancing principle, and you'll see that you're definitely going to feel more empowered and also more positive about the future. We have to keep a positive outlook in this war, at least enough positivity that's required for victory in achieving what we want to achieve here. So that's kind of my message, and that's my focus.
Oh, dope. I'm so grateful that you're here. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I can't highly recommend Unslaved and your Substack enough. There's just seriously, it's in my I got sober, so I got 9 years sober, and
congrats.
Thank you. It's been a big part of my spiritual growth, the podcast and my life. I have different parts of my life growing with that podcast on an individual level, learning about the Alexander Lowens and the archetypes and all that. So I'm just so grateful that you're here today. This is this is a milestone for me, having you here. And I even took a class of the Wu Qi Gong that you guys were talking about during the lockdowns, and that was
good for you.
So that was nice when the world was locked down, I was doing some Wu Qi Gong and moving the body. Yeah, thank you so much, David. I appreciate it.
DOENUT, man, you're awesome. What great questions you asked, and just keep doing the great work you're doing. Super fun, and let's do it again sometime. Really appreciate you having me.
I would love that. Everybody smash that like button and share the video out. Much love, and God bless you.